Hey guys, welcome. We're doing the official unboxing for the Nemean Fight System book. I am so excited. This has been a labor of love for a long time now, so I'm super excited of how to be opening up the actual box, pulling out the books and taking a look at what we've actually made. Super excited about this material. Okay, moment of truth. Oh, buddy. Look at that. Yeah. All right, we're going to come in here. We're going to take a closer look at this, but I am super excited about this. Finally, available on paperback, the entire Nemean Fight System. Okay, so let's talk about what you can expect out of this book. I'm really excited about this. It came out really great. So first of all, the printing is really smooth. It's 8x10 format. It works great. It's a nice, easy flow to the book, and it's got great color images, as you can see here, that really depict things very well. It kind of helps break down what you're going to read out of this. The book starts off with the principles of striking, and I know I've talked about some of that on the channel before, but I go into a lot more detail on this. And honestly, this is something that, like I said, most martial artists just pay lip service to it. And if you ask most instructors, like, what are the actual principles of striking? Like, they might name like 2 or 3, like, center line, you know what I mean? Like, they might know a couple, but this is not something that most people really know, to be honest. And so understanding things like the principle of built-in defenses, the feinting overload principle, and the conservation of motion and energy, reduce force principle, all that stuff is really important to know. And I'm going to refer to it a lot in this book. Chapter 2 goes into a glossary of techniques, but it's not like, here's how to throw a jab. You know what I mean? Like, anybody can YouTube that. This is talking about like different applications of techniques. So going back to that jab, instead of just here's how to throw a jab, this is the difference between a lunging jab, a penetrating jab, a standard jab, like different applications of the technique as it's done at the highest level, including kicks and certain specialty techniques, or things that are just a reference. So like here I depicted dorsal grip, which is a grip type that you use a lot in martial arts and nobody ever has a term for it. Like, well, you grab the back of the hand. So it's just giving some terms to it. I talk about the different types of fighting, different types of footwork that you can use or develop, and some things that I find are very useful. Then, of course, I get directly into the actual system itself. I talk about the goals of the system, what it's designed to achieve, and basic stance and zones of coverage, all that stuff, expanding, contracting guard. The modified Philly shell and when to use it. And then I start getting into the primary offensive attacks and the primary threats that you're going to run into in this guard from an opportunism range, and simple solutions for it that you can consistently go back to. From here, I talk about different types of responses to that, going into entries and exit strategies and how to actually set up your techniques and start setting yourself up for success, and then how to start developing a thoughtfulness drill using the fallback drill that we use to actually develop your skills in it. Then we go into pattern breaking and combinations, particularly combination groupings and combination slidings. I don't want to go into that here. I don't want to ruin it for you. This is something that I highly recommend you start learning, though. And I give a bunch of specific combinations that I like to use and how I group them in the right way. Then we get into counters and defensive tactics, where I talk about things like not just like here's how to block, here's how to slip. This is actually talking about high percentile threats, and not just that, but how to deal with different threats based on the amount of pressure that your opponent is giving you. If they're fighting from an opportunism range or a static range or pressured or like overcommitted, you deal with each of these in very different ways, and your responses should be different. Also talking about dealing with proactive versus reactive responses, early response, late response, and how to take late response reactive to a proactive to set yourself up to do more damage in a counter. Then talking about things like other strategies that are really helpful for like cutting off ring space, doing things like leg kicking and defending leg kicks, overcoming when somebody checks a lot, trapping, blitzing, psychological attacks, which is a big part of my game that I really like, fighting over multiple rounds, fighting how to start off a fight, developing fight IQ. Like, these are all really, really great tactics that you're going to get a lot of use out of. From here, I go into things like, I go into the topic of shoot boxing. I call it that as opposed to just wrestling, because you're talking about wrestling as it's can turn to striking. I'll say right now, I'm an okay wrestler. There's a lot of guys who are better than me, but when you talk about wrestling when there's striking involved, it's a whole different ball game, and that is where I'll really shine, and that's what I talk about here, is not just how to take somebody down, but how to take them down as it concerns to a striking environment, which is vastly different. I also go into a lot of depth on defending the takedowns. What to do if somebody does sprawl on you, by the way. I have a whole, I call it the failed single leg guard. Instead of treating it as a failed position, treating it as an actual offensive guard. And I go into a lot of depth on wrestling prevention, early takedown defense, and then late response takedown defense and getting back to your feet. Because if you can't keep the fight standing, you can't be an effective striker. From here, I go into chapter 8, which is dealing with clinches and talking about how to do striking from a clinch, takedowns from a clinch, when to use a tie plum clinch, how to use it, how to escape it if somebody does it to you, transitioning between clinches, using the over-under clinch, the overhook clinch, the underarm clinch, and very specific tactics to be successful. All of these I go into a lot of like chain techniques. So like in the wrestling series, the shootboxing, I talk a lot about chain wrestling, and we talk about that in here. Same thing with when we go to vertical barriers. This is one of my favorite chapters because I think this is one of those places you can put a fight to really dominate. This is all based on tactics done by the best guys in the game. Your Khabib Nurmagomedovs, Kamaru Usman's, guys like that. This is the type of stuff that they're using. And honestly, this is stuff that even guys in the UFC, a lot of these guys don't know that well. And if you can learn to dominate from a vertical barrier, whether it's a cage or a wall or a parking lot, car, whatever it is, you can really dominate a fight if you can put the fight there. And it's very easy to do once you know how. Then I go to self-defense jiu-jitsu. So if you are somebody who is a traditional martial artist who wants to learn a little bit of ground game, this is a great chapter for what to focus on, because let's be honest, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu that you don't need for a fight. It's very sport-focused. You shouldn't be spending as much time on things like deep half or, using particular guards that might not lend themselves well. Even a standard half guard is not great for self-defense. I prefer the lockdown. I go into a lot of detail on that. If you are somebody who does jiu-jitsu, it'll help you to understand what the pitfalls are when you start talking about striking and how to deal with that. So this is a really, really great chapter for somebody who wants to know about what to do. And I'm a big believer that to be good at striking, if you have a good ground game and an ability to get back to your feet, it's only going to make you that much more successful of a striker, especially in terms of level change threats and also your ability to defend it. Now, from here, this is Jiu-Jitsu Journals. Now, as a purple belt coming from a very standard Jiu-Jitsu school where I learned a lot of the classic Jiu-Jitsu that everybody else learns, and transitioning to a school where world-class Jiu-Jitsu is being taught, this is just some of my notes from class talking about every class at this school feels like I'm doing like a seminar. It's really amazing, the stuff in here. And I've got some notes in here that I think you're just going to find it fun. Then we go into a lot of self-defense theory. I start off by talking about my failures in early life, why I failed at them, and use them as a case studies for later on. So from there, I start talking about situational awareness, talking about different types of responses to fighting. And then I get into verbal de-escalation, which is a chapter I'm very passionate about, not just in terms of like de-escalating somebody when they're already ramped up, but using deer man tactics to prevent them from getting ramped up in the first place, and using good skills when you know you have to enter into a difficult conversation with somebody. And then talking about when it's important to disengage and whether or not you should feel committed to act at that point. I go into self-defense laws. Home defense is a subject that I felt was an important one to discuss here, particularly some of the myths of self-defense as well were really important to cover. Then I go into actual self-defense techniques, and what I really focus on here is distinguishing what is a high percentile effective technique that you should be using versus just a play technique that maybe you can mess around with that you see a lot of. And this is all stuff that it's all proven techniques. A lot of this stuff, we talk about escaping from a rear naked choke. It's not that Master Wong stuff. It's like real proven self-defense techniques that actually work. I use them myself. Some of these are things that you use in a competitive environment. Some of these are things that you just you use the same mechanics to be successful. It's a very no-nonsense approach, but it's also mechanically, everything is very sound in here. None of that theoretical BS that you see in a lot of self-defense systems, right? It's not focused on kicking them in the balls and poking them in the eyes. It's like real mechanical stuff that is going to be successful. I also talk about things like multiple opponent tactics, and then from here I get into weapons, both weapon disarms, which I have a very simplified system for disarms, to kind of funnel everything down to a couple of positions where you can really dominate from there. I even talk about a little bit of knife versus knife. It's not self-defense, but I thought it was a fun topic to throw in. I also talk about club and gun disarms. It's all very realistic in terms of like whether or not you can achieve it and what you can expect from those situations. Moving on from here, I start getting into Boon Sog, which is a reapplication of techniques if you come from a traditional background. Whether you come from, karate, kung fu, tang sudo, taekwondo, whatever it is, all this stuff is very applicable. I don't look at it from the approach of Boon Kai, which is what the karate guys do, which is looking at, trying to take what was done hundreds of years ago and understand how they were thinking. Rather, I look at where these movements exist in other aspects of my training and how I would apply these in a self-defense situation. And then I go into it. I use the Korean forms to break it down because nobody's really done that for the Korean forms, so I thought it would be fun to do. Then for here, I went into style solutions. This is a chapter that I think a lot of people really want to know answers to. What to do if you have a much larger opponent. What to do if somebody's a boxer. How do you fight a boxer? How do you fight a Muay Thai fighter? How do you fight a wrestler? How do you fight somebody who's a high volume pressure striker, right? What do you do with these different, very common threats, and how do you overcome it? So this is a chapter that a lot of people I think will appreciate. And then I just have some additional tactics that were things that did not appear directly and work into the system, but were fun to know, and I thought they were good things to share. From here, I talk about the art of teaching, and if you are a martial arts instructor, things that you can do to improve your teaching, and just kind of my philosophy towards this stuff. Chapter 20 is training methodology. This is a very, very useful chapter, I think, for a lot of people. I think too many people are training the wrong way. You either have traditional guys who are spending all their times on things like forms, or you have guys who are in more sport-oriented stuff like boxing and MMA, and they spend 90% of the time hitting mitts and working on skills that don't translate to actual fighting. And this book is all about taking skills and making them transferable to actual fighting. I talk about things like the constraints-led approach. I talk about different types of drills that you can do. I talk about reapplication, so taking something like one steps that is currently considered like non-useful and talking about how you can use that to grade yourself from non-resistance to resistance. And not everything is either yes or no. It's either resistance or not. There's a lot of shades in between there of things that you can use to develop those skills. And I talk about that stuff in here. Then from here, I just had some fun stuff in here that I play with as well. Some like Wing Chun stuff I've been playing with, where like I had that video I did on like techniques to use on a Wing Chun dummy if you don't do Wing Chun. That's the kind of stuff I have in here. Then I have a philosophy section, and it just kind of talks about my thoughts on like the development of your own martial arts game and how mine's evolved over the years. Things like what to do with aging and injury, keeping a beginner's mind, healthy lifestyle. I have a thing in here on just how to be happy. And honestly, it's so simple, and yet people don't know how to do it. And there's a couple proverbs that I thought kind of were things that I say a lot. Finally, I finish off with martial arts as a business, where I talk about things like not just how to start to build a school and find a location, but also things like SEO and how to rank on Google. Marketing strategies that I've tried that were not successful, like Facebook and Google ads, and marketing strategies that I found were successful. And I've got a secret thing in there where I talk about this campaign that I do that is going to really boost your visibility on things like Google. So overall, I am thrilled with how this came out. It looks great. It is exactly what I wanted this to be. And I think that this is a book that it's a game changer for a lot of people. And I think that if you are somebody who, likes to read books about martial arts, or even if you don't, if you want to like have a system that you can actually use that actually works for striking, this is a book that you want to get, because this is really talking about things like removing the chaos from a fight, putting the fight on your terms, and things like that, where you create a repeatable process that is reteachable and stuff like that. Anyway, I am thrilled with this. I could not be happier with this box opening and what this book is and what it represents. Go get it on Amazon today. Look, it's $25, and it's a book that's going to change your martial arts. So thanks for watching, guys. As always, go get your own copy on the Nemean Fight System today. And if you have any questions, let me know and I'll answer them in the comments below.